In the last video, what we enabled was the ability for us to display a Google map. And we had the ability to zoom in and out, and we were able to place a marker. And that's great. That's a really a big step from what we had done in previous classes. But there's so much more that's available with the Google Maps API. For example, where am I? Most people want to know from where they currently are to a destination. So one of the things we need to enable is this idea of places. So setting up our Google Cloud platform to enable us to know where we are currently. So let's look at how we go about doing that. So I'm in my Google Cloud console, so console.cloud.google.com. This is where we set up the API for Google Maps initially. And what you're going to do is you're going to go into this navigation menu in the upper left. And you're going to go down to APIs and Services, and then down to Library. And when you do that, you can see all the Google APIs that are available to you. So quite a few. So we're going to go to the Places API. And in here, we click on Enable. Okay, so now we have it enabled for our account. Our account's already set up because we have the Google Maps configured. And let's go into too many things open. Here we go. Let's go into our Maps activity now. And really what we have to do is just update our Maps activity to support the idea of location-based services. So the first thing that we have here is we can see our Kotlin class is called Maps Activity, and it extends app compat activity, which all of our other classes do. So if I look at main activity, for example, it also extends the app compat activity. And it also extends this interface called on map ready callback. And that's what enabled us to have this on map ready function down below. So in order to have the location-based services, we need to have one more. And it's called Google Map on marker click listener. This is sort of I don't necessarily fully understand the rationale with this particular class, but I'm going to show you how we can use it and get the results we want. So you can see, because we implemented an interface, we now have some methods that we need to implement, or at least a method. So I'm going to hold down Alt and hit Enter and implement the members. And then down here, what we see is we have this method called onMarkerClick, and it returns a Boolean value. And there's an interesting little shortcut in Kotlin where if we don't need to actually do any logic here, we can actually just say equals false, and it will always return false. So that's a little workaround. I'm honestly not entirely sure the goal of that method is, but in the documentation that I read, this is how they use it. So we use it this way, and it works. It's a black box, I guess. And then we need to go to our top of our class here. And we're going to need to enable some features for understanding where our location is. And in order to do that, we're going to create something called a fused location provider client. Now, what's a fused location provider client? Well, our mobile devices, they can actually find out their location through many different services. So for example, if you're on a network, based on the IP address, they can have an idea where a particular device is. If you are on the wireless network, so you're on your phone, you're roaming around, they can do triangulation amongst the cell towers to figure out roughly where you are. Or if the GPS is enabled in your phone, which is what the 911 emergency services would use, they can get a very precise location. So the idea with the fused location class is that it's going to take information that's available and try to minimize the impact on the battery. So for example, if we had your GPS running all the time, the battery life would just disappear. It'd be gone. So this is sort of a battery efficient, fairly accurate way of knowing where the device is. So we're going to need a couple of variables to store that information. So I'm going to say private, latent it, fused location client. Okay, so I had to add a dependency there by the looks of it. There we go. And location. That was just a regular import. So the fused location provider, I saw that it added it to my Gradle script, so let's go down to our build.gradle and check it and see if we have something called fused. No? There we go. So you can see that it added this line here, the Google Play Services location API. And it looks like the map service, it's in yellow, so it actually is maybe a slightly older version. So if I do Alt-Enter, I can change to the latest one. It'll sync now. Great. Okay, so we have these two objects, and there's one other thing that we need to set up. Looks like I need to implement on marker click. I thought we already implemented that. Okay, well, let's do it this way. Return false. All right. So in Kotlin, they have, I would argue, a better naming convention for static variables. So if you remember in Java, a static variable is a variable that all instances of an object would reference. Okay, so if I had, it's like one common variable and everyone accesses the same one. Every other variable is local to the object or relative to the object. Well, they have the same concept in Kotlin, but instead of calling it a static variable, what they call it is a companion object. So it's a companion to all of our instances. So I kind of actually like the name better. And the way we define it is we say companion object. And we're going to say private, constant, val. So this is going to be used a little bit later when we get into a permissions situation. So that's why we need to have it available to us. All right, so let's go down now and start to enable our services. So we scroll down here, and most of what we're going to do is in this on map ready. Actually, there's one thing we should do here. So this is our onCreate method, and so that's when this activity first loads. This is the first method that's called. So in here, I'm going to take my fused location client, and ask the device's location services to get the fused location provider client for this device, this context, this class. Okay, so now we can say map set on marker click listener for this. So we're set our marker click listener, which is basically then used when we set up the map with our current location. So we need to build that method. This I'm looking off my notes here because this one's it's a long one. So if the activity compat check self permissions, and then we're going to ask the Android manifest. So remember, permissions are always set up here in the Android manifest, right? So if we go up, you can see we have the permissions piece in here. So we go back to the manifest, and then we ask for permission for access find location. And I'm just going to go and say that does not equal package manager permissions granted. So basically, when the app is installed, it's going to ask, does this app have permission to use the location information? And if the user selected no, then this part here would evaluate to be true, right? Because it would check if we have permission, if the access find location is in the package manager. If that is false, then we need to ask again. So to do that, we say activity compat request permissions, pass in this, and then we say array of okay, so this is, if we don't have permissions, ask for permissions to access the find location, right, which is the granular location. And then this is where we're now going to call that up here. We created this companion object, location permission request code. So down here, we'll say location permission request code. And then we return. Okay, so if we get to this point, then we set the location enable to true, and we take our fused location client, and we ask for its last location, and we put a success answer on it. And as with all things Kotlin, it's going to call our Lambda expression it. That's the argument. But it's a little easier to talk about it as the location. So I'm going to just change that to be the location. Oops. So if we can get the last location, and it does not equal null, okay, so just to make sure that this is clear in terms of what it's doing here, is it's calling this fused location client and asking it for the last location. Okay, so we have up here this fused location client, and then we also have a variable called last location. So the idea is we're going to store the last known location in this variable called last location. So after ensuring that we have all the necessary permissions, down here we ask for the last location from our client, and if it returns a location, we update our variable. So now it's sort of locally stored. We don't have to keep going back to that other client. And then we're going to set up a variable called current lat long. Okay, so this part here is very similar to what we did above. So we got a latitude and longitude object, okay, by using our current location. And up here, we said move camera, right? So when the map was initially ready, we said move the camera. So it just goes right to wherever the latitude and longitude is. Now that's going to be a bit of a jarring effect if you're currently somewhere on the map and all of a sudden it just, boom, you're somewhere else. So they have this other method. The other, to move it, of course, is much faster. But they have this other one called animate camera. So what that does is it, if you're mapped somewhere, it will now go towards the new latitude and longitude. And then, of course, we have the same zoom idea as we did above. So let's give this a roll. So you see now it's asking me if we can have permission to access the device's location. So I'm going to say allow. And the last place that I had registered was at Georgian College. Now if you click on this little 3 dots at the bottom here, you can actually add in specific locations. So for example, if you want to put like the Barrie Marina. Save the point. Okay. Can I name that? I think you can. and then you can set that as your location. Now, what's missing right now is it didn't update. There we go. So now that our emulator didn't have a position before, so that's why it wasn't there. But now you can see it put it at the Barrie Marina at about 12F, and we can zoom in, and we can see the marina there, and the Scoops and Cones ice cream shop. So if you ever want to get some good Kawartha Dairy ice cream, that's the place to go. So that is all you need to know to get your device to figure out where it is. And that's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to look at how we can improve the markers on these.